Subtest 1, Fine Motor Precision. This subtest consists of activities that require precise control of finger and hand movement. It has 5 drawing items, 1 paper folding item, and 1 cutting item. The drawing tasks include filling in shapes, drawing lines through paths, and connecting dots. The object of each item is to draw, cut, or fold within a specified boundary. Performance is based on how well the examinee remains within the boundary. Because emphasis is placed on precision, the items in this subtest are untimed. When conducting this subtest, tear out each page as needed from the examinee booklet before placing it in front of the examinee. Erasing is not allowed on any item using the pencil. Make sure to sharpen the pencil before testing begins, and resharpen the pencil as needed during testing. The examinee should use his preferred drawing hand for items in this subtest that call for the distinction. Before administering each item, teach the task to the examinee using verbal and nonverbal directions as necessary to ensure understanding of the task. Items 1 and 2, filling in shapes, circle, and star. Place page 2 of the examinee booklet in front of the examinee and have the red pencil ready to use. The examinee holds the pencil in his preferred hand and colors each shape, staying inside the lines and filling in the shapes as completely as possible. After the testing session is over, record the score for each shape using the scoring diagrams and guidelines found on page 5 of the administration easel. Items 3 and 4, drawing lines through paths, crooked and curved. Place page 3 of the examinee booklet in front of the examinee. He holds the pencil in his preferred hand and draws a line through each path, from the car to the house. The examinee may stop and restart. That is, the line does not have to be continuously drawn. Do not allow him to rotate the test page more than 45 degrees while drawing. After the testing session is over, record the number of errors for each path using the guidelines found on page 7 of the easel. Item 5, connecting dots. Place page 4 of the examinee booklet in front of the examinee. The examinee holds the pencil in his preferred hand and, without lifting the pencil off the page, draws straight lines to connect the dots in proper sequence. He begins and ends at the dot labeled Start Finish and may go in either direction. Do not allow the examinee to rotate the test page more than 45 degrees or lift the pencil off the page while connecting the dots. If the examinee lifts the pencil off the page, remind him to keep it on the page and have the examinee place the pencil on the page where it was lifted off. Count and record the number of pencil lifts. Stop the trial if the examinee connects dots out of sequence. Remind him of proper sequence and restart the examinee at the dot where he went off course. Do not score the line that went off course and do not count the pencil lift necessary to get him back on course. After the testing session is over, record the score using the diamond overlay on the scoring transparency and the guidelines found on page 9 of the easel. Item 6, folding paper. Place page 5 of the examinee booklet in front of the examinee. Demonstrate folding the corner of the paper labeled Examiner on its line.
Can you do that on the other 3 corners?
The examinee folds each of the 3 remaining corners along each line in any order, and then folds the paper in half along the middle line. The lines should be on the outside as the examinee makes each fold so that he can use the lines as guides for each fold. After the testing session is over, record the score using the straight line overlay on the scoring transparency and the guidelines found on page 11 of the easel. Item 7, cutting out a circle. Place page 6 of the examinee booklet in front of the examinee and have the scissors ready to use. The examinee holds the scissors in his preferred hand and cuts out the circle. Examinees are permitted to rotate the paper as much as needed. Some examinees will use a series of straight cuts, which is permissible, but it is important that cuts beyond the circle are taken into account when scoring each segment. After the testing session is over, record the score using the circle overlay on the scoring transparency and the guidelines found on page 13 of the easel. The activities in the Fine Motor Precision and Fine Motor Integration subtest require additional scoring procedures that should be performed after testing is complete. The scoring rules for the items in these fine motor subtests are discussed here, and several examples are shown to illustrate various aspects of scoring. Scoring Subtest 1, Fine Motor Precision. Items 1 and 2, filling in shapes, circle, and star. Use the diagrams on page 5 of the administration easel to score these items. These diagrams illustrate the range of performance from 0 to 3 points. 2 diagrams each are used to illustrate a 1-point and 2-point performance, with each pair representing the low end and high end of performance for that score. For each shape, compare the examinee's attempt with the scoring diagrams to determine where in the range the examinee's attempt falls. For example, this star looks better than the star representing the low end of the 2-point score, but not as good as the star representing the high end. Therefore, it gets a score of 2. Items 3 and 4. Drawing lines through paths, crooked and curved. Determine the number of errors made on each path using the following guidelines. An error is made each time the examinee's line goes outside the boundary line, even the slightest bit. How long the line remains outside the boundary lines determines how many errors it counts for. Using the ruler on the scoring transparency, measure each error. If the error is less than 1/2 inch long, count it as 1 error. If the error is 1/2 inch or longer, add an additional error for each 1/2 inch the line remains outside the boundary lines. In this example, the examinee's line only slightly crosses the boundary line, so it counts as 1 error. Here, the line remains outside the boundary for just over 1 inch, so it counts as 2 errors. If the examinee's line omits a large portion of the path, the error counts as the maximum 21 errors. Item 5. Connecting dots. During the testing session, count and record the number of times the examinee lifts the pencil off the page. Place the diamond overlay on the test page, aligning the dots, and score each line separately. Note that you should be able to read the text on the transparency when it is placed correctly. If the examinee's line crosses either outside dotted line, score the line a 0. Crosses either middle dotted line, score the line a 1. Crosses either inside dotted line, score the line a 2. Does not cross any of the dotted lines, score the line a 3. Repeat this procedure for each line. Add the 4 line scores to get the total line score, and then subtract the number of pencil lifts to get the final item score. Item 6. Folding paper. Use the straight line overlay on the scoring transparency and the following guidelines to determine the score. You may find it helpful to use a pen or pencil to trace the examinee's folds, making it easier to see the fold lines on the page. Place the scoring transparency on the page so that the solid line of the straight line overlay covers one of the solid lines on the examinee booklet page. If the examinee's fold crosses either outside dotted line, score the fold a 0. Crosses either middle dotted line, score the fold a 1. Crosses either inside dotted line, score the fold a 2. Does not cross any of the dotted lines, score the fold a 3. Repeat this procedure for each fold and then add the 4 fold scores to get the final item score. Item 7. Cutting out a circle. Determine the score using the circle overlay on the scoring transparency and the following guidelines. Place the circle cutout on the gray square on page 6 of the examinee booklet, with the arrow pointing up. Then, place the scoring transparency on the circle cutout, aligning the arrows, and score each segment separately. If the examinee's cut crosses either outside dotted line, score the segment a 0. Crosses either middle dotted line, score the segment a 1. Crosses either inside dotted line, score the segment a 2. Does not cross any of the dotted lines, score the segment a 3. Repeat this procedure for each segment, and then add the 4 segment scores to get the final item score. If the examinee cuts out the circle using a series of straight cuts that go beyond the circle line, you may find it helpful to use a pen or pencil to mark the end of each cut. Then place the circle cutout back into its original position on the test page. Place the transparency over the circle and score each segment as before. The cuts beyond the circle should be taken into account when scoring each segment. Do not count the initial cut to reach the line.